my God, they're going to bury him alive. Maya Williams froze, her fingers tightening around the flimsy plastic water cup she'd been holding. The paper-thin cup crumpled in her grip and slipped from her hand, shattering on the linoleum floor. Water splashed everywhere, trailing under the hospital bed. The voice had come from the air vent. Not her imagination, not the pain meds. She wasn't that high. Then came the second voice, sharp, panicked, male. Shh, someone's in the vent, get her. No. Everything inside Maya went cold. She was in room 614 at Mercy Valley Hospital, recovering from an emergency appendectomy. It was 2:38 a.m. The hallway was silent except for the faint beeping of machines and the occasional murmur of nurses. She'd been pacing her room in her oversized hoodie, trying to shake off the woozy fog of anesthesia. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the voices had come through the air duct above her bed clear, unmistakable. And what she heard, no normal person could forget. They'll declare him brain dead in 72 hours. One voice had said, no autopsy. Quick burial. By then, the board will be too late to act. Harland Industries becomes yours. Maya's stomach turned. Luke Harland. Everyone knew that name. Billionaire tech founder, philanthropist, darling of Wall Street, and according to what she'd just heard, about to be murdered by his own brother. Her breath caught. They weren't just plotting. They were in the middle of executing it. And now they knew she was listening. She staggered back from the wall, eyes wide, breath shallow. Her stomach twisted, both from panic and the fresh jolt of pain slicing through her side. The stitches from her surgery screamed in protest. She clutched her abdomen, feeling warmth spread through the thin cotton of her hospital gown. Blood. Oh no, the incision had torn. But she couldn't stay. The footsteps were immediate, swift, heavy, not hospital staff. She grabbed her phone from the tray, slipped it into the pocket of her hoodie, and stumbled toward the door. Her legs barely worked, her vision blurred, but some primal part of her brain had taken over. Run. She flung the door open and burst into the hallway. The overhead lights flickered in a half-lit gloom. Her bare feet skidded on the smooth floor, the cold biting through her hospital socks. Behind her, voices rose, loud and furious. There she is. Oh. She heard everything. Stop here, damn it. A sharp bang rang out, a gunshot. Maya screamed. She didn't look back. Her body moved on instinct. She turned down a side corridor, darted past a nurse's station, and slammed through the stairwell door. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. With every step, pain seared her side like fire. She pressed her arm against her stomach, fingers sticky with her own blood. She's bleeding, just follow the trail. The voice was closer now, laced with rage. Maya stumbled down the stairs, one flight, then another. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her. Her vision narrowed. Her limbs trembled. She turned at the second-floor landing, ignoring the exit door and darting instead into the adjacent laundry room. She slammed the door shut behind her and collapsed to the floor, her back pressed to the cold metal of a washing machine. The room was silent, except for the hum of dryers and the pounding of her heart. Her mouth was dry. Her eyes scanned for anything she could use to defend herself, a mop, a bottle of bleach, anything. Nothing but towels and machines. She curled into the shadows, breathing through clenched teeth. Blood oozed from her reopened incision, warm and steady. Her hands trembled as she pulled her hoodie tighter, trying to hide the spreading stain. Her mind reeled. That wasn't just a conversation between two hospital staff. That was a murder in progress. They weren't planning to kill Luke Harland. They were already doing it quietly, methodically, and now desperately trying to silence the only witness. Her, a billionaire, someone everyone in America knew was being slowly, chemically murdered. And she, Maya Williams, a 29-year-old freelance accountant from Detroit, recovering from a stupid appendix surgery, had accidentally heard the whole thing. She covered her mouth with her hand to muffle the rising sob. She didn't want to be a part of this. She wasn't a hero. She was just someone who had enough money for a semi-private hospital room for once in her life. That was it. That's all she wanted: quiet, recovery, a few days away from the stress of overdue invoices and freelance taxes. But this wasn't about what she wanted. It was about a man being buried alive. And now, a bullet had already been fired. She waited minutes, maybe longer until the footsteps faded above her. Her body shook as she stood, gripping the wall for support. She opened the laundry room door and peeked into the hallway. Clear. She slipped out, retraced her path carefully, and returned to her floor. She avoided the main corridor, walking close to the walls like a ghost. Her room door was still ajar. Inside, she locked it, pulled the curtains tight, and collapsed onto the floor. Her side throbbed relentlessly. She peeled up her hoodie. The bandages were soaked through. Her stitches had split. Blood seeped onto the cool tile. She fumbled for her phone and opened a search engine, hands still shaking. Luke Harland. The name brought up pages of results. Photos. Headlines. Tech awards. Humanitarian honors. Glossy covers with his silver-streaked hair, serious gray eyes, and effortless smile. But as she read beyond the headlines, a different portrait emerged. Luke wasn't just a billionaire. He was a builder. A man who created renewable tech for schools in Africa, who had funded coding programs for underprivileged kids in her own neighborhood back in Detroit. The kind of man who didn't just write checks. He showed up. Her throat tightened. They're going to bury him alive. That wasn't just a horrifying line from a crime movie. It was happening, right now, and she was the only one who knew. She clicked another article. A photo showed Luke standing with a tall, sharply dressed black man, both smiling at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Gregory Miles, legal counsel, former prosecutor, nationally recognized for defending civil rights cases, old friend of the Harland family. Bingo. Maya took a slow, painful breath. Her blood was still seeping, her head swimming, but one truth rang louder than the pain. She had to tell him. 911 wouldn't believe her. Not without evidence. Not with how she looked. Black. Alone. On painkillers. Bleeding in a hoodie in the middle of the night. But Gregory Miles, if anyone had the power to act and the credibility to be heard, it was him. She changed into black leggings and a fresh hoodie, pulled her curls into a bun, stuffed tissues into her hoodie pocket to press against the bleeding. Then she tiptoed out, leaving her discharge papers unsigned. She exited the hospital before sunrise. The air was damp and cold. She called a rideshare and gave one destination, Miles and Fox Legal, Financial District. As the car pulled away, she looked at her hands still red with blood and whispered to herself, voice breaking, "I'm not a hero, but maybe I can be the reason someone gets to live." If you felt connected to Maya's courage, hit like and drop your city in the comments. You never know who nearby might be watching with you. Maya pressed the crumpled tissue harder against her side, feeling the wet warmth of blood soak through. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of pain across her abdomen. But she refused to wince aloud. The driver, a middle-aged man with heavy eyes, glanced at her through the mirror. "You all right, miss?" She forced a small smile. "Yeah, just a long night." He nodded and said nothing more. The silence felt merciful. When the car finally stopped in front of a tall glass tower in the financial district, Maya's phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "Stay quiet if you want to live." Her blood ran cold. No name, no context. But she knew exactly who it was from. She deleted the message, shoved the phone in her pocket, and paid the driver with trembling hands. The building loomed above her sleek marble steps, revolving doors, and gold letters that read Miles and Fox Legal. At 5:12 a.m., the lobby was empty except for a janitor mopping near the elevators and a receptionist yawning behind the counter. Maya hesitated at the glass doors, her reflection staring back. Blood-stained hoodie, hair a tangled mess, skin pale beneath the fluorescent lights. She looked like someone who just crawled out of a nightmare. But nightmares didn't matter now. She pushed through the door and walked straight to the front desk. The receptionist blinked, startled. "Ma'am, we don't open until 8. Maya's voice came out rough and too loud. "I need to see Gregory Miles. Right now." "I'm sorry, he's not. It's about Luke Harland." The name landed like a stone in still water. The receptionist's face shifted confusion first, then suspicion. Mr. Harlan's family has requested privacy. We're not giving out statements. Maya leaned closer, lowering her voice but not her urgency. He's not dead. The woman froze. They're going to bury him alive, Maya whispered. And if Gregory Miles doesn't see me in the next 5 minutes, you can tell the news you turned away the only witness who could save him. Something in Maya's eyes, desperation. Maybe truth made the woman reach for the phone. One moment. She dialed, murmured quickly, then nodded. 6th floor. He'll see you now. The elevator ride was a blur of polished chrome and shallow breathing. Maya pressed her hand harder to her side. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. The moment the doors opened, a tall man with silver hair and calm brown eyes stood waiting. Gregory Miles didn't look surprised, only concerned. "You're bleeding," he said softly. "Sit down." "I don't have time to sit," Maya said, voice shaking. "They're killing him." Gregory gestured toward his office. It was large, warm, lined with bookshelves and morning light filtering through tall windows. But Maya barely saw any of it. She stumbled toward the chair opposite his desk and sank down, clutching her abdomen. "Start from the beginning," he said, voice steady. She told him everything, the voices, the plan, the gunshot, the chase. The words poured out of her like water through a broken dam. Sometimes her sentences tripped over each other, but Gregory never interrupted. He only listened, brow furrowing deeper with each detail. When she finished, the room felt too still. Gregory stood and walked to the window, staring out over the waking city. "Luke's brother," he said finally, his voice low. "Tristan Harlan, half-brother. I knew there were tensions, but—" He shook his head. "This is beyond greed." "You believe me?" she asked, incredulous. "I'd be a fool not to." He turned back, his eyes sharp now. 3 days ago, Luke called me. Said he wanted to revise his will. He planned to restructure Harlan Industries to cut Tristan out entirely. But before he could sign anything, he collapsed. Maya's throat went dry. "Poisoned. That's what I suspect." Gregory reached for his phone. "We'll need proof. And I know exactly who can find it." He pressed a button on the intercom. "Linda, get Dr. Elias Boone at Stanford Medical, Toxicology Department. Tell him it's urgent." He hung up and looked at Maya. "You did the right thing coming here." She shook her head. "No, the right thing got me shot at. They'll come after me." "They won't. Not if I can help it." He walked to a cabinet, opened a drawer, and retrieved a small first aid kit. Kneeling beside her, he spoke gently. "You need stitches, but for now, this will hold." He cleaned the wound, taped it carefully, and offered her water. His voice softened. "You're safe here, Miss Williams." Maya stared at him. "How can you be sure?" "Because I don't lose cases," he said simply. For the first time since the hospital, she almost smiled. 15 minutes later, Dr. Boone called back. Gregory put him on speaker. "I can test for neurotoxins," Boone said, "but I'll need a sample. Do you have access to Luke's blood work?" "I can get it," Gregory said, quietly. "You'll have 24 hours before they destroy or replace it," Boone warned. "After that, it's gone." "I understand." Gregory hung up and looked at Maya. "You're not going back to that hospital. Too dangerous. I'll send someone to collect your belongings. For now, I'll put you in one of our corporate apartments." "I can't just hide," Maya protested. "If they find out someone talked, they'll know it was me. Then we'll give them something else to look at." He smiled faintly. "Let's make them believe you disappeared." By sunrise, the office buzzed with quiet urgency. Gregory's assistant arranged safe housing, and a firm driver escorted Maya to a discreet high-rise apartment overlooking the bay. She stood by the window, wrapped in a borrowed coat, watching the fog lift. For the first time, she saw sunlight touch the city. Her phone vibrated again. Another text. "You shouldn't have talked." No number, no trace. Maya's knees weakened. She turned off the phone, placed it face down on the table, and whispered to the empty room, "I'm not going to die for doing the right thing." "Do." Across the city, Gregory Miles leaned over his desk, reading through Luke Harlan's medical files he'd just obtained through a quiet contact at Mercy Valley Hospital. The lab reports were clean, too clean. Every toxicology panel marked negative, but one line caught his attention. Administered compound HN12, under physician supervision Dr. Samuel Knox. Gregory exhaled slowly. "You arrogant bastard," he muttered. He picked up the phone again. "Boone, I found something. Sending it now." That evening, Boone confirmed the impossible. HN12 wasn't a standard medication. It was an experimental neurotoxin, known to induce paralysis and simulate brain death. Maya listened quietly as Gregory relayed the findings over speakerphone. When the call ended, she could barely breathe. "So he's alive," she whispered. "Yes," Gregory said, "alive and running out of time." He looked at the city lights beyond the window, his reflection pale against the glass. "We've got 72 hours before they bury him." Maya felt the weight of those words settle on her chest like a stone. She pressed her palm to the bandaged wound, steadying herself. "I don't know how to be brave," she said quietly. Gregory's gaze softened. "Bravery isn't something you learn, Maya. It's what you do when you're terrified." She turned toward him, her voice trembling but steady. "Then I guess I'll have to do it scared." He smiled, the faintest glimmer of admiration in his eyes. "Good, because the clock starts now." The sun had barely crested the bay when Maya stood outside the Miles and Fox Tower again, this time in borrowed jeans, a clean black hoodie, and a dull ache beneath her ribs where fresh gauze held her together. She felt out of place here, among the polished glass and marble of San Francisco's financial district. Pedestrians in crisp suits moved around her like she was invisible. The pain meds had started to wear off, but adrenaline kept her upright. Inside, the lobby had transformed from its ghostly pre-dawn silence to a steady hum of purpose. Lawyers in tailored suits moved like sharks in still water. Maya followed the directions from Gregory's assistant and took the elevator to the top floor. This time, no one tried to stop her. Gregory Miles met her at the door to his office with a steaming mug of black coffee and a look that mixed respect with urgency. "You look better," he said. She lifted the mug. "This helps. You'll need it." He gestured her inside. The office was the kind of room that made people sit up straighter. Deep mahogany bookshelves lined the walls. A floor-to-ceiling window framed a postcard view of the bay. It smelled faintly of leather and cedar and something older legacy. Gregory motioned for her to sit. He didn't sit himself. Instead, he crossed to the far side of his desk and picked up a folder marked Confidential. "Elias Boone confirmed everything," he said. "HN12 is a compound derived from a discontinued military neuroagent. It was buried after the Cold War. Classified. It suppresses neural activity and mimics total brain death." "You heard right, they were going to bury Luke alive." Maya's fingers tightened around the coffee mug. "God." Gregory opened the file and pulled out a printed copy of Luke Harlan's medical chart. "This," he said, tapping the page, "was signed by Dr. Samuel Knox. He's been Luke's family physician for over a decade, trusted, untouchable." She stared at the signature. "And now he's a murderer." "He's not alone," Gregory said darkly. "Tristan Harlan doesn't just want the company, he wants to erase Luke. To control the legacy. And judging by the speed at which they moved to bury him, they're scared." "Because Luke was changing something?" Gregory nodded. 3 days ago, Luke told me he wanted to restructure the company. Create an independent board. Shift power away from his family. Tristan would lose everything. It wasn't just money. It was pride. Ego. Maya's eyes drifted to the window. So Tristan tried to fix it the only way he knew how, get rid of the problem. Exactly. Gregory leaned forward. "Now here's the catch. We don't have long. Elias needs time to develop an antidote, but we estimate 48 hours before the remaining compound renders Luke's brain activity undetectable." Her stomach turned. "So even if we save him, the world will think he's already gone." Gregory's voice lowered. "Unless we act first." Before Maya could respond, Gregory's assistant, Linda, knocked on the door. She entered with a cautious glance at Maya. "Mr. Miles, Tristan Harlan just released a statement. He's holding a private memorial this Friday. Closed casket. Immediate burial." Maya's heart dropped. "That's in 2 days." Linda nodded. "He told the press Luke died of complications. No autopsy. The hospital already released the body to the family's private mortuary service." "Fast," Gregory muttered. Too fast. They're skipping the death certificate review, Linda added. I checked. There's a rush order filed under medical privacy exemption. Jesus. Gregory stood, jaw tight. They're steamrolling the system. Maya felt the walls closing in. What do we do? Gregory was already moving. We petitioned for an emergency court order. I'll contact Judge Ellison. She owes me a favor from a wrongful death case 3 years ago. We'll force a medical reevaluation before the burial. Linda hesitated. They've buried people faster, Greg. You know how this works. Gregory's jaw clenched. Then we work faster. He turned to Maya. You're coming with me. Where? To the courthouse. You're our key witness. Your testimony is what makes this more than speculation. Maya blinked. Wait, testimony? Like, on record? Yes. He looked at her gently but firmly. We can't win without you. Her throat tightened. Fear rose like a wave. They shot at me, Greg. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not brave. I do taxes. And that's exactly why they'll believe you. He held her gaze. You're not some media figure or political pawn. You're a woman who risked her life to tell the truth. She swallowed hard. What if I mess it up? Gregory smiled softly. Then we try again, but something tells me you won't. Maya nodded slowly. Okay, let's do it. They left the office together, descending in a private elevator. Gregory walked with the steady confidence of someone who'd faced giants before. Maya, meanwhile, held her breath and followed his lead. At the courthouse, the halls were empty but humming with quiet authority. Gregory introduced her to Judge Ellison, a composed black woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and silver braids. I don't usually sign emergency medical evaluations without physical evidence, she said, folding her hands. But Mr. Miles says you have first-hand knowledge. Maya sat across from her, palms sweating, and told her story again, this time under oath. She recounted every word she'd heard through the vent, the icy detachment in Knox's voice, Tristan's bitterness, the gunshot, the blood, the text messages. Judge Ellison said nothing for a long moment. Then she reached for her pen. I'll authorize an emergency injunction, she said. The mortuary must delay the burial until a neutral medical team evaluates Mr. Harland. Relief washed through Maya's chest like warm water. Gregory exhaled beside her. We'll serve the order tonight, he said. We need time to get Elias inside. As they walked back toward the waiting car, Maya looked up at the courthouse steps, the same steps where she had always seen activists and lawyers standing on the news. She never imagined she'd stand there, too. I don't feel brave, she murmured. Gregory paused beside her, watching the city glow beneath the setting Sunday. No one ever does, he said. Bravery's not about how you feel. It's what you do next. The car ride back from the courthouse was silent at first, filled with the low hum of the engine and the occasional creak of suspension over San Francisco's uneven streets. Maya stared out the window at the fading daylight, watching as the city slowly transformed into a glowing tapestry of lights. Her hands were clenched in her lap, the court order tucked securely in the folder between them. Do you think it'll work? She finally asked. Gregory kept his eyes on the road. It has to. Judge Ellison's signature holds weight. Legally, they can't proceed with the burial until the independent medical review is done. And if they ignore it? They won't, he said firmly. Because if they do, we hit them with obstruction, malpractice, conspiracy, every legal weapon we have. And believe me, we have plenty. Maya nodded but said nothing. The adrenaline from earlier was wearing off. Her body was aching again, her bandaged side burning with every breath. But worse than the physical pain was the creeping sense of dread, the feeling that every second mattered, that something irreversible could happen if they were even one step too slow. They returned to the Miles and Fox building just after 7. The lobby was quieter now, but the tension in the air had only sharpened. Gregory led her up to the top floor again, where his assistant Linda was already waiting in the conference room with a printout of Luke Harlan's hospital chart and a list of contacts. Boone will be ready tomorrow morning, Linda said, handing Gregory a manila envelope. He's already assembling a team to conduct the reevaluation, but we'll need access to Luke before then. Gregory opened the envelope and studied the document inside, a preliminary statement from Boone, confirming the existence and effects of the HN12 compound. If they fight the court order, we use this, he said. Maya took a seat, sipping from a bottle of water. Her head was pounding. How do we get into the mortuary? Good question, Gregory replied. They're using the Harland family's private funeral home, Noble Oaks Memorial, in Napa Valley. Discreet. High-end. Very private. Of course they are, Maya muttered. They'll resist, Linda added. We should expect pushback, especially if Tristan gets wind of the injunction before we get there. Maya looked at them both. What if he accelerates the timeline? What if he tries to bury Luke before Boone arrives? Gregory paused. Then we get creative. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Paul, it's Greg. I need a federal marshal to accompany an emergency court order to Napa. Yes. Tonight. No delays. While Gregory handled logistics, Maya stood slowly and wandered to the window. The conference room overlooked the Embarcadero. From up here, the fairy lights looked like stars floating on water. 2 days ago, she was just another face in a hospital gown, worried about insurance deductibles and her next rent payment. Now she was the reason a billionaire might live. A knock came at the door. Linda opened it, revealing a tall, lean man in a dark suit and a weathered expression. He nodded at Maya, then turned to Gregory. Marshal Bennett, you called? Thanks for coming, Gregory said, shaking his hand. We need a federal escort to ensure a private mortuary complies with a court injunction. The family involved has resources. We need presence. Bennett nodded. I'll make sure no one interferes. He looked at Maya. You're the witness? She nodded slowly. Then we'll keep you safe. The weight of those words safe settled over her like a blanket she hadn't realized she needed. They left just after 9 p.m. A 2-car convoy headed north toward Napa Valley. Gregory rode with Maya in the back of a black SUV while Marshal Bennett followed behind in a separate vehicle. The ride was long and quiet, punctuated only by the sound of tires against asphalt and the occasional chirp of the police scanner in the front. You should try to rest, Gregory said gently. I can't, Maya whispered. What if we're too late? He didn't offer false comfort. He simply said, then we'll deal with it. Together. That word together gave her something to hold on to. They arrived at Noble Oaks Memorial just after 10:30 p.m. The building sat atop a small hill surrounded by old oak trees and soft, well-manicured lawns. The lights inside were low, the parking lot empty but for 2 black luxury cars near the side entrance. The mortuary manager, a small man with silver hair and a clipped tone, met them at the door. We're closed, he said briskly. Gregory stepped forward, handing him the court order. Not anymore. The man read the document, his jaw tightening. This is highly irregular. And yet, Gregory replied, perfectly legal. Marshal Bennett stepped into the light behind them. The man blinked, clearly reconsidering his stance. Fine, he muttered. Follow me. He led them down a quiet corridor, past rooms with polished wood doors and soft organ music playing from hidden speakers. The walls were painted in muted beige tones, the air thick with the scent of lilies and incense. They stopped in front of a sealed viewing chamber. He's in there, the manager said. Per family request, the casket has already been sealed. Unseal it, Bennett said flatly. The man hesitated. It's not that simple. It is now. No. With a sigh, the manager retrieved a set of keys and began the process. Maya stood back, heart hammering. She'd imagined this moment a dozen ways, but now that it was real, it felt like a dream. Cold sweat clung to the back of her neck. When the lid of the casket was finally lifted, a rush of air escaped, cool, still, and far too sterile. Luke Harland lay inside, pale and motionless. His face was ashen, his lips slightly parted. The stillness was unnerving. Maya's breath caught. Is he? Wait, Gregory said. Boone's associate, a young ER doctor named Ray Chen, stepped forward. He pressed 2 fingers gently to Luke's neck. The room held its breath. There, Chen whispered. Faint, but present. He's alive. Maya felt her knees give way. She gripped the edge of a nearby table, tears springing to her eyes. He's alive, she repeated, barely a whisper. Gregory let out a long breath. We've got him. Chen reached into his bag and pulled out a vial clear liquid with a pale blue tint. This is the first dose, he said. It won't reverse everything tonight, but it'll stop the decline. We'll stabilize him, then start detox. He injected it into Luke's foreline with calm, practiced hands. As the medication entered Luke's system, silence filled the room. Then, barely noticeable, his chest rose just slightly. A deeper breath. A tremor in his fingers. Maya pressed a hand to her mouth, unable to speak. Gregory turned to her. You just saved a man's life. The room was quiet. But not with peace, rather. With that hushed, suspended air that fills a space, after catastrophe, has been narrowly avoided. Dr. Ray Chen leaned over the casket, his eyes trained on the slow rise and fall of Luke Harlan's chest. It's starting to work, he said quietly. Maya stood frozen in place, her hands trembling at her sides. Her heart was racing so hard she could hear it in her ears. Just moments ago, Luke Harlan had looked like a corpse. He still did. Technically, his skin was waxy, lips tinged blue, but he was breathing. He was alive, not dead, not buried, not lost. She swallowed hard. Are we too late? Chen checked the vitals again. If we'd waited another 12 hours, yes. But now he has a chance. Mo. Gregory exhaled beside her, his hands in the pockets of his trench coat, watching silently as Chen secured a portable oxygen unit and adjusted Luke's position. We need to move him now, Chen said. I have an ambulance team standing by 10 minutes from here, off the books, but we can't leave him here. Gregory turned to the mortuary manager, who'd hovered awkwardly near the doorway the entire time, pale and sweating. This man is not dead, and if you interfere, even slightly, I will personally see to it that Noble Oaks is shut down and every one of your licenses revoked. Are we clear? The manager nodded so fast his glasses nearly slipped off his nose. As Chen and Bennett began preparing Luke for discreet transport, Maya stepped away from the casket, toward the hallway. Her hands were sticky with adrenaline. Her side ached from the reopened wound. Her whole body was screaming for rest, but there was no rest yet. She leaned against the cool marble wall and let her eyes close for just a second. 1 second. She had never seen anyone that close to death before. Not her grandmother in hospice. Not the boy who'd been hit by a car when she was in middle school, not like this. Luke had been so still, so fragile. Not the billionaire in magazine covers. Not the man hailed as Silicon Valley's conscience. He'd looked like a man the world had already forgotten, and she had helped bring him back. A faint vibration in her pocket pulled her out of the haze. She pulled out her phone. No caller ID. One new voicemail. Her thumb hovered, hesitation buzzing beneath her skin. Then she played it. A man's voice, distorted and low. You had your chance to walk away, but now, you'll learn what it feels like to be buried too. She stared at the screen, chest tightening. She didn't recognize the voice, but she knew who it was from. Tristan. Gregory appeared beside her, watching her face. Another message? She nodded, showed him the screen. He didn't flinch. Good. Let them keep talking. Every threat helps us build the case. I'm not afraid of the case, she whispered. I'm afraid of him. Gregory didn't offer empty comfort. He just said, that's smart. Stay afraid, but don't stop. The transport went quickly. Luke was wheeled out through the back loading dock, covered under layers of blankets, escorted by Marshal Bennett and Chen's team. Gregory ensured that the mortuary staff signed a temporary release form, tying them legally to the chain of custody. Every step was documented. Every minute accounted for. Once Luke was secured in the ambulance, Maya climbed into Gregory's car. It was well after midnight now, and the cold had sunk deep into her bones. She shivered despite the heater blasting warm air through the vents. You need sleep, Gregory said as he drove. Maya shook her head. I won't. Not until I know he's okay. Boone's team is setting up at the safe house in Marin. Quiet place. Private security. Luke will be monitored around the clock. She glanced out the window. The winding roads out of Napa were quiet, dotted only by the headlights of passing cars and the occasional deer darting through the trees. You really think he's going to make it? She asked softly. I think he already has. Gregory gave her a brief look. Thanks to you. No, she said, shaking her head. I just heard something. I didn't save him. You ran while bleeding, after being shot at, to warn a man you never met, he replied evenly. That's more than most people would do for their own family. She didn't answer. She just folded into herself, the weight of everything pressing down. When they reached the apartment Gregory had arranged for her, sleek, quiet, overlooking the bay, she moved like someone underwater. Inside, the lights were low, and a bowl of fresh soup sat on the counter, courtesy of the building concierge. "You'll be safe here," Gregory said, as he handed her a spare keycard. "Security on this floor is tight. Cameras, guards. Nobody gets in or out without clearance." She nodded. "Thank you." "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow, everything gets louder." She gave a faint, tired smile. "Just another normal week, huh?" He smiled too, then turned to leave. "Lock the door behind me." She did, and only then, standing alone in the quiet, did Maya finally let herself cry. Not loud, not messy, just silent tears that traced down her cheeks as she leaned against the door. She had done something impossible tonight. She had stood between a man and his grave. And the worst part, she had the gut-deep certainty that it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Tristan Harlan stared at the early morning news feed glowing across his penthouse wall. His face, handsome in the angular way that was often mistaken for integrity, was eerily calm. The headline scrolling beneath the news anchor's perfectly made-up face read, "Emergency court order halts. Luke Harlan's burial. Medical re-evaluation ordered." He took a slow sip from his espresso cup and didn't blink. "Idiot judge," he muttered. Behind him, a nervous man in a gray suit shifted his weight from foot to foot. His name was Charles Dalton, Harland Industries' interim legal advisor, and the unfortunate soul who had taken this morning's call from Gregory Miles. "They have the body," Charles said. "We weren't fast enough." Tristan didn't turn around. "Of course they have it. Gregory Miles always did like to play God." Charles cleared his throat. "Should I call Dr. Knox?" Tristan finally looked over his shoulder. "No. Knox is done. If the antidote is working, we've already lost that piece." You think he'll survive?" "Don't ask stupid questions, Charles." Tristan crossed to the window, the city stretching out beneath him like a conquered kingdom. "This isn't about survival. This is about perception. If Luke opens his eyes, he becomes the martyr, the resurrection, the wronged brother, and I become the devil." Charles stayed silent. Tristan turned back, jaw tightening. "But he doesn't remember anything yet, does he? Gregory's office won't confirm either way." Tristan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then we'll assume the best and prepare for the worst." He tapped a button on his phone, connecting to a private line. After 2 rings, a gravelly voice answered, "Go ahead." They moved the target. "Noble Oaks is compromised." The man on the other end grunted. "I warned you about Gregory Miles." "You warned me about noise," Tristan snapped. "I don't care about noise anymore. I care about cleanup. Loose ends. Witnesses." There was a pause. Then, "You want the girl. She's the crack," Tristan said coldly. "The one they'll keep hidden, protected. But all it takes is one leak. Find her. Make it quiet. As one. As why. Will. As one. .cam. Or .com. As a .com. .com. With her 7th. The line went dead. Tristan turned back to Charles. "Call the board," he said. "Tell them the transition is delayed but intact. No need to panic." Charles blinked. "You're still going forward with the power shift?" Tristan's expression hardened. "I'm not pausing this empire because my brother decided not to die fast enough." "No." He finished his espresso and tossed the cup into the fireplace, where it shattered with a soft crack. Across the bay, Maya sat curled in an oversized chair in the corner of the safe-house apartment. Her body ached, her stitches pulled. Her eyes were puffy and raw from crying she hadn't planned to admit to anyone. But in her lap, she held something that made it all real again. A photo. It had been left for her on the kitchen counter, slipped beneath a note in Gregory's handwriting. "I thought you should know who you're saving." The photo was candid, taken at a charity event. Luke Harlan stood on a rooftop terrace, his arm around a group of high school students, Black, Latino, Southeast Asian kids from underserved districts. All of them were smiling, including him. Not the practiced smile for the press, A real one. The kind of smile that made you believe the world wasn't entirely broken. Maya traced her finger over the image. "I hope you wake up," she whispered. "I hope you remember." A soft knock at the door startled her. She stood, stiffly, and peered through the peephole. It was Gregory. She unlocked the door and let him in. He looked tired but charged with that energy only purpose can generate. "They tried to access the safe house camera feeds," he said without preamble. "Last night. Failed attempt. But it means they're looking." "Tristan?" He nodded. "He knows you're alive. And more importantly, he knows you spoke." "Moga." Maya sat back down, tension returning to her shoulders like a lead weight. "So I'm not just a witness anymore. I'm a target." "You always were," Gregory said. "The difference is, now you know." She let out a hollow laugh. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No, just prepared." He sat across from her. "We're making our move tomorrow. Boone says Luke's brain activity is stabilizing. There's evidence now, data, imaging, proof that he wasn't dead when they tried to bury him." "No," Maya blinked. "And that's enough to prosecute?" "Not yet, but with your testimony and the toxicology results, we'll have enough to trigger a federal investigation." She looked down at her hands. "Do you think he'll remember what happened?" Gregory hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. HN12 has gaps in long-term memory impact. But even if he doesn't, we have your word, your courage." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "What if they come for me first?" "We'll be ready." She shook her head. "No, I want to be ready." Gregory studied her. "You want to testify publicly. If I don't do it now, while I still have the nerve, I never will. He deserves to live. And the world deserves to know what they tried to do." Gregory gave a slow, approving nod. "All right then, let's burn the mask." That evening, at exactly 7:02 p.m., Maya Williams appeared on live video, her hair pulled back, a plain navy shirt, eyes steady. She sat beside Gregory in a secure studio, framed against the seal of the San Francisco District Court and the Miles and Fox insignia. She didn't cry. She didn't stutter. She spoke. "I didn't know Luke Harland. I'm not part of his world. I'm just a woman who got sick and was in the wrong room at the wrong time. Or maybe the right one. Because I heard them, his brother and the doctor. I heard them say they were going to bury him alive." "Oh." The footage was sent to every major outlet within minutes. CNN, MSNBC. Even conservative networks picked it up, because scandal sells. And this one had it all: money, betrayal, corruption. Within 2 hours, the Harland family's PR firm issued a flat denial. But it was too late. The world had seen Maya's face. And more importantly, they believed her. The storm came swiftly. By sunrise, Maya's name was trending across every major news platform. Number, Maya Williams. Number, Harland scandal. Number, buried alive. Some called her a hero, others called her a liar. Commentators argued on live television about whether her story was real or another desperate attempt at fame. But for every talking head spewing skepticism, there were thousands of ordinary people flooding the internet with messages of support. She risked everything. That's what courage looks like. If a woman like her can speak up, what's our excuse? Protect Maya at all costs. At 8:45 a.m., Maya sat on the safe house couch, watching a morning show host tear into Tristan Harland's cowardly silence while Gregory paced nearby, phone glued to his ear. "They just filed a motion to challenge the court order," he said as he ended the call. "They want to discredit your testimony. Claim it's fabricated for personal gain." Maya scoffed. "Because being nearly murdered and having my life torn apart is such a great career move?" "They're scared," Gregory replied. "This is what desperation looks like." But Maya wasn't prepared for what came next. At 10:22 a.m., a video surfaced online, grainy footage from a hospital hallway security camera. It showed her barefoot, bleeding, disoriented, rushing past a nurse's station, chased by a man in scrubs. The caption read, "Unstable witness? Who is Maya Williams really?" Her stomach dropped. "They're trying to paint me as delusional," she whispered. Gregory's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then turned to Maya with a grim face. "Tristan's team just released a press statement. They claim you were in the hospital under psychiatric evaluation after a breakdown. They're demanding a full mental health review before your testimony is allowed in court. Maya sat very still. That old familiar feeling crept up her spine in visibility. The way people had looked through her when she spoke up about harassment at her last job. The way her landlord dismissed her when she complained about mold. The way authority always found a way to ignore women like her, black, poor, and inconvenient. "They're going to erase me," she said quietly. "Just like they tried to erase Luke." "No," Gregory said firmly. "They're not." He crossed the room and sat beside her. "You know what you saw. What you heard. And now the world knows it too. They can throw shadows, but they can't unring that bell. And I promise you, we are not backing down." Her voice was a whisper. "What if I don't survive this?" Gregory's jaw clenched. "Then I'll make damn sure your truth does." That afternoon they moved Luke. The safe house, while secure, had become a liability. The leak to the press proved someone in the hospital's chain of command had been bought. And Tristan's reach extended further than they'd hoped. Boone and his team loaded Luke, still unconscious but breathing stronger, into a private medical transport. Destination: an undisclosed federal facility outside Sacramento, guarded by marshals and off-grid. No cell towers. No press. As the ambulance pulled away, Maya watched from a tinted SUV window. "Wherever he's going," she said, "I hope he wakes up soon." Gregory sat beside her, silent. Then, without warning, a black SUV pulled into the intersection behind them. Then, another. And another. 3 identical vehicles. No plates. Tinted black. Maya felt her heart kick. "That's not normal," she said. Gregory's eyes narrowed. "Driver. Lose them." The SUV surged forward. Tires squealed. Maya gripped the seat as the car turned sharply down a side street. Then another. The trailing vehicles followed. "Why are they chasing us?" "They're not press," Gregory muttered. "They want you." 1,000 thoughts raced through Maya's mind. Was this the same group from the hospital? Hired muscle? Police imposters? Suddenly, the SUV swerved and jerked to a stop. The driver turned. "We have to move now." Gregory yanked the door open. "Run." Maya didn't hesitate. She bolted from the car, Gregory close behind. They sprinted through a parking garage, Maya's breath catching in her throat. Pain lanced through her side, but she didn't stop. Gunshots echoed behind them, sharp, brutal cracks that ricocheted off the concrete walls. Gregory shoved her behind a column. "Stay low." He pulled a small pistol from his coat, a last resort weapon, and fired twice at their pursuers. A shout rang out, and one of the attackers stumbled. Sirens in the distance. Someone had called it in. The attackers retreated, their tires squealing as they vanished into the city. Gregory grabbed Maya's hand. "Come on. We're not safe here." They climbed a fire escape and entered through a locked maintenance door Gregory somehow had a key for. Inside, a dusty, unused office. Gregory made a call. "We need immediate extraction. 2, downtown. Target compromised." He hung up. Maya leaned against the wall, gasping. What the hell was that? Tristan just made it personal. By evening, Maya was relocated again, this time to a federal protection site in a quiet mountain town. Cell service was limited. The cabin had reinforced windows, a backup generator, and a landline phone. Outside, the air was still. The forest whispered with early autumn leaves. It felt like a different world. Gregory handed her a blanket and a mug of warm tea. "You saved a man from being buried alive," he said. "They're trying to do the same to you, not with poison but with lies, fear, silence." Maya stared at the fire flickering in the small hearth. "What do I do now?" He sat across from her. "You wait. And when Luke wakes up, you help him tell the world." She looked into the flames, her voice soft. "Do you think he'll believe me?" Gregory's answer came without hesitation. "I think he already does." The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. Maya sat at the small kitchen table, nursing a cup of instant coffee that had long since gone cold. Her fingers toyed absently with the handle as her eyes stared past the steam-fogged window. Outside, the forest lay draped in an early autumn hush, leaves like gold and rust dancing in the breeze. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind, every snapping twig beyond the porch made her flinch. Fear had changed shape. It was no longer a bullet in the dark or a man chasing her down a hallway. Now it was silence, uncertainty, the question she couldn't stop asking. What if he never wakes up? She hadn't seen Luke since the move. Boone had restricted all access to the recovery room except for medical staff and the security team. They said his vitals were stable, that the antidote was working. That time was on their side. But the hours stretched on, and the silence grew louder. She jolted slightly when Gregory stepped through the front door, shaking off cold air and pine needles. He carried a plastic grocery bag in one hand and a folder in the other. "Breakfast of champions," he said, tossing her a protein bar. "You haven't eaten since last night." "I'm not hungry." "Doesn't matter," he replied, settling into the chair opposite hers. "You'll need strength. We're not done." She unwrapped the bar, forced herself to take a bite. Gregory opened the folder. "Luke's latest scan," he said, sliding the images across the table. "Frontal cortex activity has resumed. Memory centers lighting up. Motor function flickers." Maya blinked. "So, he's dreaming?" Gregory nodded. "More than that. He's processing. You don't come back all at once, it's layers. But he's on the way." She stared at the scans, those ghostly swirls of light and shadow. "He's fighting." "Mal." "Yes," Gregory said, "but we need to be ready for when he wakes." Maya looked up. "What does that mean?" Gregory leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Luke's been gone nearly a week. In that time, Tristan's tightened his grip on the board, installed loyalists, restructured stock options, issued internal memos naming himself acting CEO. Can he do that? She asked. He can do a lot of things. Legally, it's shaky. Ethically, it's a disaster. But no one wants to challenge him without Luke's voice. Maya's chest tightened. So we're racing a deadline. Gregory nodded. And Tristan's already planning a public appearance tomorrow. A keynote address at the Harlan Foundation Gala. Let me guess, she said. He'll dedicate it to Luke's memory and frame himself as the grieving brother taking up the torch, Gregory added. He'll lock public sentiment in his favor before Luke can reclaim it. She stood abruptly, pacing across the room. I hate how good he is at this. The control. The lies. He's sculpting a legacy, while Luke's still fighting to breathe. That's why we need a counter-strategy, Gregory said. If Luke wakes up, we need to be ready to remind the world who he really is, who you are. Maya turned to face him. What do you mean? I want to film a second statement, he said. Not from a studio, from here, real, raw, you, speaking directly to Luke. No filters, no edits. She hesitated. Why? Because if he wakes up confused, scared, unsure of who to trust, your voice may be the one thing he remembers. The thought hit her like a wave. She nodded slowly. Okay, let's do it. That afternoon, they filmed on the porch. A single camera. Natural light. No makeup. No coaching. Just Maya and the weight of everything she had carried. She looked into the lens. Luke, I don't know if you can hear this. I don't know if anything I say will reach wherever your mind is right now. But I need you to know. I heard them. I heard what they planned. I saw what they were going to do to you. And I couldn't walk away. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. You don't know me. We've never met. But I risked everything because your life matters. Not because you're rich. Not because you're famous. But because no one deserves to be erased. Tears slipped down her cheeks. They're saying I imagined it, that I'm crazy, that I'm lying. But I'm still here, still standing, and I believe, if you come back, you can tell them the truth. You can reclaim your name, your legacy, your life. She exhaled shakily. I believe in you. That night, Gregory uploaded the video to a private channel and sent it only to Boone's team. It's not for the press, he told Maya. This one's for him. She nodded, then went to bed, exhausted in body and spirit. At 3:12 a.m., a secure line rang in the safe house. Gregory answered on the first ring. The voice on the other end was Dr. Boone, low and measured, but filled with something unmistakable. Urgency. He opened his eyes, Boone said. Only for a second, but he spoke. Gregory stood, instantly alert. What did he say? Boone paused. Then, he said her name. Gregory looked toward the room where Maya slept, unaware that everything was about to change. She'll be ready, he said. Tell him. She never stopped fighting. The morning air in the mountains was crisp, but not cold. Dew clung to the pine needles, and the sun had only just begun to peek over the ridgelines when Gregory gently knocked on Maya's door. She stirred, groggy, not yet fully awake. He opened the door halfway, his voice soft but urgent. Maya, he said your name. She sat bolt upright, heart thundering. What? Luke, he's awake. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her mind tried to make sense of the words. Awake? Alive? After everything? Boone just called, Gregory said. Only a few seconds of lucidity, but he was conscious. Eyes open, he recognized you. Maya swung her legs over the bed and stood too fast, swaying. I want to see him. I figured you would. They were already packed by the time the private transport arrived. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the cabin, and a federal agent stepped out to escort them back to the secure facility. There was no time for breakfast, no small talk, just movement, urgent and steady. Maya clutched the photo Gregory had given her, the one of Luke surrounded by kids. She'd kept it close, tucked into the inside pocket of her jacket like a promise. They drove in silence, Maya's mind racing. What if he's confused? What if he doesn't remember? What if they got to him first? But the louder thought, pulsing like a drum beat. He's alive. He's awake. He knows me. The facility was tucked deep in a wooded canyon, surrounded by natural barriers and man-made security. Armed guards waved them through two gated checkpoints before they were led into a clinical white hallway with softly humming lights overhead. Boone met them outside the ICU room. His face was tired but smiling. He's drifting in and out, still weak, but the toxins clearing, the antidotes holding. Maya clutched the back of a chair for balance. Can I see him? Boone nodded. He asked for you. Inside, the room was still. Machines beeped quietly. Monitors glowed soft green and blue. And in the bed, thinner, paler, but undeniably alive, was Luke Harland. His eyes were open. When he saw her, they widened. A flicker of recognition. Maya, he rasped. Her heart twisted. She stepped closer, unsure whether to speak or cry, or drop to her knees. Instead, she managed a trembling smile. You remember? He blinked slowly, as if dragging his mind through molasses. I heard you, in the dark, your voice. It kept me from falling. Tears welled in her eyes. They tried to bury you. I know, he whispered. Tristan. Gregory, watching from the doorway, nodded. He remembers. Boone stepped forward. We'll keep conversation short. His vitals are still stabilizing. But he's tracking. Processing. Maya looked back at Luke. We've gone public. My testimony's out. They're trying to discredit everything. But the world's listening. Oh. Luke closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. You saved me. She took his hand gently. You're not out of the woods yet. I don't care, he said, as long as I'm not 6 feet under. A beat passed, and then unexpectedly he smiled. That same smile from the photo. A little worn, but real. I want to speak, he said, publicly. Gregory frowned. That's risky. Your body isn't ready for. I wasn't ready to die either, Luke interrupted, voice hoarse but firm. And yet here I am. Back at the safe house, Maya paced while Gregory took another call. The pieces were moving fast now. Tristan's gala is tonight, he said as he hung up. Broadcasted live. Major media outlets. He's going to announce himself as Luke's successor and frame the whole thing as a graceful transfer of power. Maya's eyes narrowed. You're not going to let him, are you? Gregory offered a half smile. Not if our friend has anything to say about it. Maya sat down, exhaling deeply. How soon can we go back to the city? Tomorrow. Boone wants to keep Luke under observation another night, but we've arranged for a secure stream. If he's strong enough, he'll speak. And the world will hear it. She nodded slowly. After everything he's been through, I don't even know what he'll say. Gregory leaned back in his chair. Doesn't matter. He's the truth now. And the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be heard. That evening, In a marble ballroom gleaming with chandeliers, Tristan Harland stood before a crowd of CEOs, donors, and media personalities. A sleek stage, a curated video montage of Luke's philanthropic legacy, candlelight dinner service. Tristan wore black. Subtle, respectful, perfect. He stepped up to the podium with solemn eyes. My brother was a great man, visionary, generous, but more than that, he was human. And like all great men, his time was cut short. Ziria. The audience listened, enraptured. Maya, watching from the safe house, clenched her jaw. He believed in progress. Tristan continued. And in passing the torch to those strong enough to carry it forward, he gestured to a polished plaque bearing Luke's face. As of tonight, I humbly accept the mantle of leadership. The screen behind him flickered. A beat of static. Then, Luke Harland, alive, eyes focused, skin pale but breathing, sitting upright in a hospital bed, heart monitor blinking softly behind him. Tristan froze. The audience gasped. "Good evening," Luke said, voice low but clear. "I wasn't planning to make an appearance tonight, but I hear my brother was about to deliver a eulogy for someone who isn't dead." Gasps turned into murmurs. The crowd stirred. "I want to be clear," Luke continued. "I was not in a coma. I was not sick. I was poisoned. By people who stood to gain from my silence. From my death." "Vin." Maya held her breath. "I'm alive," Luke said. "And I remember." He looked into the camera. "I remember everything." Tristan's face, drained of color, said more than words ever could. Tristan Harland did not flinch. Not visibly. As the ballroom erupted into gasps, murmurs, and a collective rising of shocked voices, he gripped the sides of the podium with white-knuckled precision. His jaw tightened, but only slightly. His media training kicked in like a muscle reflex. He leaned toward the microphone and, with the forced poise of a man still clinging to control, said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I wasn't aware my brother had recovered enough to speak, but I welcome his miraculous return." A few in the audience applauded nervously, hesitantly. The rest watched the screen, where Luke Harland's live feed remained steady, unwavering. Maya sat on the edge of her seat, eyes locked on the stream from the safe house. Luke looked tired, deep shadows under his eyes, and a tremble in his fingers as he adjusted his oxygen tube, but his voice was sure. "Let's not pretend," Luke said calmly. "This isn't a miracle. This is survival. The result of one woman's courage and a handful of people who refused to let me be buried alive." He paused. "I'm talking about you, Maya Williams." Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Luke continued. "You risked your life to tell the truth. You broke through the noise. I owe my life to you and to Gregory Miles, Dr. Ray Chen, and the others who believed me when I couldn't speak for myself." Tristan laughed softly into the mic, almost a chuckle, like a man indulging a child. "Brother," he said, "you've been through something traumatic. I can't imagine what you're feeling, or why you'd say such things." Luke leaned forward. "You don't need to imagine. You just need to remember." Silence fell again. "I remember the cold," Luke said. "I remember my lungs filling with liquid, the sting of that drug in my veins, and I remember your voice, Tristan." Luke's eyes were steel. "You said, 'He won't feel a thing.'" There were audible gasps. Cameras flashed. Reporters stood up, shouting questions. "Is that true, Mr. Harland? Are you accusing your brother of attempted murder? Is this a corporate coup?" Tristan stepped back from the podium. His face said it all. The carefully curated public image, the measured grief, the polished black suit it cracked like glass. He turned and strode off stage, ignoring the shouts. Security trailed him, confused, uncertain. The room dissolved into chaos. At the safe house, Maya sat frozen. Her face was wet with tears she hadn't realized were falling. Gregory turned to her. "You did it." "No," she whispered. "He did it." Gregory nodded. "And now, we protect him." No. By midnight, federal investigators had arrived at Tristan Harland's home in Pacific Heights. Unmarked cars. Warrants in hand. He wasn't there. At 2:03 a.m., the U.S. Marshals issued an official statement. Luke Harland's testimony had triggered a criminal investigation into alleged attempted murder corporate fraud, and obstruction of justice. By 3 a.m., the Harland Foundation website had been scrubbed of Tristan's profile, and by dawn, Tristan Harland had disappeared. Luke was moved to a private recovery facility under heavy guard. Maya wasn't allowed to visit him immediately, but she understood. He needed rest, and so did she. She returned to the safe house that night, exhausted beyond measure, but for the first time in days, her sleep came easy. She dreamed of voices, of soil falling on a casket, of a hand reaching up, breaking through the dirt, and hers, reaching back. 3 days later, the knock came. Maya opened the door and found Luke standing there, still pale, still healing, but alive and upright. Their eyes met, and no words came at first. Finally, Maya whispered, "You really made it." "I don't think I would have," Luke said softly, "if you hadn't pulled me back." She stepped aside to let him in. The room felt different now, brighter, somehow, like something sacred had been returned. "I don't remember all of it," Luke admitted. "There are holes, but I remember your voice, over and over, like a tether." Maya looked down. "I was just scared. I didn't want to be brave. I just couldn't let it happen." "That's what makes you brave," he said, "doing it anyway." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Luke leaned forward. "I'm not going back to Harland Industries. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Maya blinked. "But why?" "Because I've seen what it becomes when it's used for power, control, greed. I want to build something else now, something real." She nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" Luke smiled gently. "The truth, and your voice, the one that saved me." That night, they recorded a joint message. Luke spoke first, reaffirming his experience, naming the people who helped him, and calling for justice, not revenge, but truth. Then Maya spoke, to the people who felt powerless, to the women who were told to stay quiet, to the workers whose voices were buried, and to every person who had ever been made to feel small. "You don't need power to speak the truth," she said. "You just need a pulse." Within 24 hours, the video reached 10 million views. By the end of the week, Congress had announced a hearing on pharmaceutical abuse, corporate accountability, and executive overreach, naming Harland Industries among the targets. Maya's name was no longer buried under hashtags. It was on the lips of news anchors, in op-eds, on t-shirts. Tristan Harland remained missing, but the world he tried to bury had risen. And with it, the woman who refused to be silent. The city felt different now. Bigger, louder, more awake. Maya stood at the edge of Union Square in San Francisco, blending into the morning crowd beneath the golden October sunlight. Tourists snapped selfies by the heart sculptures. A nearby saxophone player crooned, "A change is gonna come," his music rising and falling with a haunting ache. The news cycle had moved fast, too fast. But some stories refused to go quietly. The Harland case was no longer just a scandal. It was a reckoning. The Justice Department had opened a full investigation. A Senate committee had subpoenaed corporate documents from Harland Industries. Luke's legal team, backed by Gregory Miles and several whistleblowers from inside the company, were cooperating with authorities to trace everything from the financial transactions that funded the attempted murder to the experimental drug trials tied to HN12. But the one thing they still didn't have was a body. Not Luke's. Tristan's. He had vanished. No private jet logs, no border crossings, no digital trace. Ghosted. Until now. "He's in the desert," Gregory said. Maya blinked. "What?" Gregory handed her a printed satellite image and a black and white photo of a weathered Adobe-style home tucked near the Arizona border. Interpol flagged a recent alias used to book a fuel delivery outside Tucson. The name was fake. The money was real. And the fuel went to a property formerly owned by one of Tristan's shell corporations. Maya stared at the photo. "How sure are you?" 80%. She raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of risk for 20% doubt." Gregory leaned in. "It's our best shot, and we need to move before he disappears for good." "What's the plan?" "Luke's authorized a private extraction. U.S. Marshals are stretched thin, and Tristan's lawyers are playing stall tactics. But if we find him and secure proof of flight, coercion, or threats, we can press for an international warrant, extradition, seizure of assets." Maya exhaled slowly. This was it, the final thread. "Am I going with you?" she asked. Gregory paused. "Do you want to?" She didn't answer right away. Her body still bore the scars, physical and emotional, of being hunted. She was tired, but something deeper burned behind her ribs. A need for closure. For justice. For Luke, she said. Yes. 3 days later, they arrived in Arizona. It was dry and desolate, an endless canvas of sand and brush, cut by roads that stretched for miles with no sign of life. The air tasted of dust and gasoline. Maya sat in the back seat of the SUV, staring at the horizon, her heart ticking louder than the tires rolling over cracked pavement. Gregory drove. Next to him, a retired Navy SEAL named Ramirez monitored drone footage on a tablet. His fingers moved with quiet precision. "We're 20 minutes out," Ramirez said. Still one heat signature inside. No movement outside the perimeter for over 2 hours. "Armed?" Gregory asked. "Can't confirm, but odds are yes." Maya shifted. "And we're going in anyway." Gregory glanced back at her. "It ends tonight." The house looked like a ghost story, low and crumbling, painted the same color as the sand that surrounded it. No neighbors, no phone lines. A rusty generator out back. Ramirez killed the engine and gave a nod. "Let's do this." Gregory exited first, hand resting on his concealed weapon. Ramirez followed, circling wide. Maya stayed back, crouched behind the SUV door, watching. Her blood roared in her ears. Then she heard it. The screen door creaked. A figure stepped out, thin, slightly hunched, a shadow of the once flawless man who stood at that glittering podium only weeks ago. Tristan Harland. He squinted into the light, then froze. "Maya." His voice was a rasp less, a greeting than a warning. Maya rose slowly from behind the door. "You remember me," she said flatly. His lip curled. "You ruined everything." She stepped closer, heart pounding. "No," she said. "I stopped a monster." "One?" he scoffed. "You think the world cares about your little fairy tale? About some maid who heard something she shouldn't have? You were nothing before this." Gregory stepped between them. "Tristan Harland, by the authority of the state of California, and in coordination with federal investigation, we're placing you under citizen's detainment until law enforcement arrives." Tristan laughed. Actually laughed. Then, too fast to think, he reached for something at his hip. Ramirez was faster. One shot rang out. Not to kill, just enough to drop him to his knees. The gun fell from Tristan's hand, clattering into the sand. He grunted, clutching his shoulder, eyes wild. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "No," Maya said, her voice steady. "You will." The arrest made headlines the next morning. Photos of Tristan Harland being loaded onto a medical transport plane, cuffed and swaddled in bandages, filled every newsfeed in America. His face, once untouchable, now looked hollow. Defeated, human, the man who tried to bury his brother had finally been unearthed. Maya watched the footage from a quiet cafe in downtown Tucson. Luke called just after noon. His voice was stronger now. "They said you went with Gregory." "I did," Maya said. "I wish I could have seen his face." She smiled faintly. It wasn't pretty. Luke was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Thank you." "You already said that." "I'll keep saying it." She sipped her coffee. "What happens now?" "Justice," Luke said. "The real kind." That evening, Maya stood on a balcony overlooking the desert. The sky was bleeding orange and lavender, stars poking through like quiet promises. She thought about all the things she had almost lost. Her voice, her life, her soul, and she thought of the moment she ran, bleeding, terrified but unwilling to stay silent. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a force. It was the most watched trial in the country. Reporters lined up at 5 a.m. outside the San Francisco Federal Courthouse, shivering in the coastal morning chill. Cameras were stacked on tripods like rifles before battle. Microphones pointed at a building that had suddenly become the stage of a national reckoning. The banner on every network read the same thing: United States versus Tristan Harland. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. The gallery was packed. Victims of corporate abuse, families of whistleblowers, retired Harland Industries employees, advocates, skeptics, survivors, and Maya Williams. She sat near the front row, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart drumming beneath a neatly pressed blazer. On her left sat Gregory, on her right. A quiet, federal marshal. This time, she didn't have to sneak in. She had a seat at the table. Tristan entered through the side door, flanked by armed guards. He wore a gray suit, noticeably looser on his frame. The bruising from his arrest had faded, but the damage to his confidence had not. His eyes scanned the courtroom and landed on Maya. For one brief second, his gaze flickered. Recognition, contempt, something close to fear. She didn't look away. She wanted him to know she was still standing. The prosecution opened with fire. "This is not a case about business rivalry," the lead federal attorney declared. "This is a case about power abused. A man who orchestrated the attempted murder of his own brother to steal $1 billion empire and silence those who stood in his way." Maya's name was the second word spoken. Luke's name was the third. The evidence unfolded like a grim novel bank transfers to offshore accounts, altered medical reports, digital correspondences between Tristan and the private contractor who synthesized the untraceable toxin HN12. Maya watched as the emails were displayed on screen. One stood out. "It'll be painless. Quick. He won't suffer. Make sure it looks like a stroke." Signed, TH. On the second day of trial, Maya took the stand. She walked slowly, deliberately, every eye on her. But this time, she wasn't trembling. She wasn't the maid. She wasn't the girl in the hallway, with bloody hands and shaking breath. She was the voice that couldn't be buried. The lead prosecutor stepped forward. "Miss Williams, do you recall the night of the incident?" Maya took a deep breath. "Yes." "Where were you?" "In the Harland Estates West Wing, near the library. I was preparing the evening tea." "And what did you hear?" She looked directly at the jury. "I heard Tristan Harland say, 'Make sure he doesn't wake up.'" A murmur rippled across the courtroom. She continued. "They talked about dosages, how to transport Luke's body without raising suspicion. They had a plan. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't confused grief. It was deliberate." Tristan's attorney objected. "Speculation." "Sustained," the judge said. But the jury had heard it. Maya continued, voice strong. "When I tried to leave, I knocked over a glass. They chased me. One of them fired a gun at me. I bled through my shoes getting away. But I ran anyway, because if I didn't, Luke would be dead." The defense tried to paint Maya as unstable. "Miss Williams, didn't you once seek counseling for stress-related insomnia?" "Yes," she answered clearly, "because working 12-hour shifts for rich people who think you're invisible takes a toll." Laughter erupted in the gallery. Even the judge smiled faintly. They tried to rattle her. They failed. By the end of the first week, Luke took the stand. His face had filled out. His color returned. But the scar on his hand where the IV had been was still visible. He began with a truth few billionaires ever spoke aloud. "I didn't earn my empire," he said. "I inherited it, and I didn't see the rot growing beneath my own roof." He looked at the jury, his voice steady. "My brother tried to bury me, and the only reason I'm here today is because a woman most of you would have ignored, refused to be quiet." He turned toward Maya. "She didn't just save my life. She gave me a reason to live it differently." Maya felt tears burn behind her eyes. Not from pity, from justice. Closing arguments arrived like the final chord of a symphony. The prosecution stood before the jury and said, "It's rare to witness evil dressed so well. But make no mistake, evil is exactly what we've seen here. Let today be the day that power bows to truth." The defense tried to spin desperation. This was a misunderstanding, twisted by a media frenzy and a woman seeking relevance. But no one believed it anymore. Not after the recordings. Not after the emails. Not after Maya. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict came just before sunset. Guilty on all charges: attempted murder, fraud, obstruction of justice. The room exhaled, and Maya wept, silently, gratefully, without shame. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but she didn't stop to speak. Not yet. She walked alone to the edge of the plaza, where a bronze statue of a woman holding scales stood tall against the crimson sky. Justice. Uneven. Imperfect. But still standing. Gregory found her there. He didn't speak, just stood beside her as the wind picked up. Finally, Maya said, "He's gone." Gregory nodded. "And you're still here?" She turned to him. "No, We're still here. And behind her, for the first time in her life, a crowd began to cheer her name. 3 weeks had passed since the verdict. San Francisco had returned to its usual rhythm: car horns, ferry whistles, the blur of trolleys climbing steep hills. But for Maya Williams, the world was no longer the same. She was no longer just a name in a headline, no longer a whisper in the shadows of power. She was Maya Williams, a symbol, a survivor, a storm that didn't break. She lived in a modest apartment now, a cozy walk-up in the Mission District, filled with sunlight, hardwood floors, and plants she was slowly learning not to kill. The old uniform from the Harland estate was packed away in a box she hadn't opened since the trial ended. People on the street recognized her sometimes. They said her name with reverence, not in the way they used to say miss when ordering her around, but in the way people say thank you without speaking it aloud. One morning, as she stepped into her corner cafe, the barista smiled and handed her a cup without asking for her order. "I added a little extra caramel today," he said. "You deserve something sweet." Maya smiled, touched. "Thank you, Tyler. You taught people like me to speak up," he said quietly. "I'll never forget that." But not everyone was cheering. With the Harlan trial's ripple effects reaching every corner of corporate America, pushback was inevitable. Talk shows debated her motivations. Some pundits called her the maid with a messiah complex. Online trolls questioned her background, her education, her mental health. Gregory warned her it would come. "This isn't just about justice," he told her. "It's about control. You shook the system. The system fights back." She didn't flinch. Not anymore. Luke had remained out of the public eye since the trial. The press called it a strategic retreat, speculating he was hiding from the fallout or planning a comeback. But Maya knew better. He wasn't hiding. He was healing. They spoke on the phone every few days short, meaningful calls where words didn't need decoration. Sometimes he asked how she was sleeping. Sometimes she asked how his physical therapy was going. And sometimes they just breathed together. That was enough. Until the day he called and asked, "Will you come see me?" The drive north took 3 hours. Past the Golden Gate, past the wine country, up into the hills of Mendocino, where the air was crisper and the noise of the world faded into the rustling of oak trees. He'd bought a small retreat property there, a simple, one-story lodge with wide windows and no trace of his old empire. No logos, no suits, just wood, stone, and silence. Maya pulled into the gravel driveway and saw him waiting at the porch, leaning on a cane. He looked stronger, not just in body but in spirit. They didn't speak right away. He walked down to meet her. She met him halfway. "I like the beard," she teased. He smiled. "I like the freedom." Inside, the cabin was warm with the scent of cedar and coffee. Luke handed her a mug and gestured toward a worn leather couch near the fireplace. They Saturday, no cameras. No witnesses, just 2 people bound by survival. "I've been writing," he said after a while. "Not speeches, not press releases, just thoughts." She nodded. "You always seemed like a writer underneath all that armor." "I think the armor was the writing," he admitted. "Now I just want truth." He pulled out a weathered notebook and flipped to a page. "I want to start something. A foundation. For whistleblowers. For maids. Nurses. Delivery drivers, janitors, anyone who sees something and knows they'll be crushed for speaking." Maya blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." She took a long breath. "You want me to be involved?" "I want you to be the first name on the board," he said. "The face, the voice." She hesitated, not out of fear, but out of the weight of the offer. "You think people will listen?" He looked at her with the same conviction he had the day he faced his brother. "They already are." That night, she stayed in the guest room. Stars filled the sky like dust from heaven. The wind whispered through the trees, and for the first time in a long time, Maya slept without dreams. Just stillness. And peace. The next morning, she found Luke outside, sitting on the porch steps, watching the sunrise. She sat beside him. "I'll do it," she said. He turned, eyebrows raised. "The foundation, I'm in." He smiled. And for the first time since the trial, Maya smiled too, not out of relief, not out of survival, but out of purpose. Later that week, the news broke. Luke Harlan returns and he's not alone. A new foundation, a new mission, and at its heart, a woman who once spilled tea in the hallway and now poured truth into the world. The launch of the Harland Williams Foundation lit up the media landscape like wildfire across dry brush. It wasn't just a new nonprofit. It was a movement. Interviews flooded in. Op-eds hailed Maya as the conscience of a broken system. Talk show hosts, some of whom had once scoffed at her background, now leaned in eagerly, asking about her thoughts on ethics, leadership, and accountability. She answered them all the same way. I'm not a leader, I'm a listener. I just happened to speak when it mattered. And yet, quietly, without pomp, she had become the moral compass of a national conversation. Luke, still recovering, kept his appearances limited, but when he did speak, it was always with reverence. Maya reminded me what power is supposed to do, he told 60 Minutes. Protect, not punish. The foundation's launch event took place in an old civic hall in Oakland. Deliberately humble, echoing with the footsteps of organizers, workers, and survivors. No tuxedos. No string quartets. Instead, folding chairs, local vendors, and testimonies from everyday Americans who had once been too afraid to come forward. Maya stood backstage, listening. A teacher who exposed a rigged curriculum, a mechanic who leaked evidence of brake malfunctions in military vehicles, a hospice nurse who reported elder abuse and was fired for it. Each voice trembled at first, then steadied, then soared. Luke stood beside her, cane in one hand, the other resting on his chest as he breathed in the moment. You did this, he said. No, Maya whispered. We did this. But even as applause filled the hall, shadows stirred beyond the stage. Tristan's sentencing hearing loomed just 3 weeks away, and in the weeks leading up to it, whispers began to circulate, legal leaks, press sources, sudden motion filings from his defense team. Gregory warned her first. We have a problem, he said one evening as they met in a quiet corner of a Berkeley cafe. Maya closed the file he had just placed on the table. What kind of problem? Gregory tapped the folder. There's a woman, former Harland executive. She claims Luke knew about the poisoning plans in advance. Maya blinked. That's a lie. I believe that, Gregory said, but the press won't. And if this goes public now, before sentencing, it could shatter everything, she finished. Gregory nodded. She's filed a sworn affidavit, claims she has recordings. Nothing has been authenticated yet. Maya folded her arms. Why now? Because power doesn't vanish. It hides. And sometimes, it bites back when you're not looking. Later that night, Maya called Luke. She didn't sugarcoat it. There's someone saying you were complicit, she said softly. That you knew they were planning to kill you, and let it happen anyway for sympathy, or to stage a return. There was a long silence on the other end. Then quietly, I'm not surprised. No. You're not? Maya, he interrupted gently. They've been grooming narratives like this since I was 15. They don't care about truth, just leverage. Is it true? She asked. The pause that followed cut like glass. No, he said, but it won't matter until we prove it. The next morning, Maya and Gregory met with a federal investigator. They handed over all communication records between Luke and Tristan, including one message, time-stamped 4 hours after the alleged poisoning plan began, where Luke emailed his assistant with plans for the next day's board meeting. Hardly sounds like someone anticipating a coma, the investigator said dryly. Still, the rumor had legs. Media outlets began to frame the story as a possible double deception. Hashtags questioning Luke's integrity trended briefly. Maya held a press conference. One mic, one camera. She didn't prepare notes. She just stood there and spoke. When you stand up to power, it doesn't just fall. It flails. It throws dirt. It rewrites stories. But truth doesn't need edits. I was there. I bled. I ran. I saw a man nearly buried alive by his own blood. She paused. You don't have to believe me, but don't pretend to forget. The tide began to turn back. The woman recanted her story just days later, under oath, claiming she had been coerced by a private legal fixer tied to Tristan's old network. That fixer was soon subpoenaed for witness tampering. Gregory leaned against Maya's office wall that afternoon, arms crossed, relieved. That was close, he said. It won't be the last, she replied. That night, Luke showed up at her apartment unannounced. She opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, blinking. Sorry, he said. I just needed to see you. She stepped aside. He walked in slowly, lowered himself onto the couch, and stared at the window as the city lights blinked outside. I thought I was ready for all of this, he admitted. But the weight, it's different when you're standing under it. Maya sat across from him. You don't have to carry it alone. He looked at her. Then stay. A long silence. Then, I wasn't planning on going anywhere. Outside, the wind picked up over the bay. Inside, the two sat in silence, not afraid of the darkness anymore, because the storm had passed. But both knew. Some shadows linger after the lightning fades. The courtroom was colder than usual, not in temperature but in tone. Sterile, stiff, weighted. It had been 6 months since Maya first stepped into a courtroom as a witness. But this time, it felt different. Heavier, somehow. Like the final exhale of a long-held breath. It was sentencing day. Tristan Harland would hear his fate. The room was filled with familiar faces, lawyers, reporters, victims. No longer were they strangers connected only by headlines. They had lived this storm together. Maya sat in the second row, behind the prosecution bench. Gregory was beside her, his arms folded across his chest. His eyes focused ahead like a soldier awaiting orders. And Luke was already there, seated quietly near the back. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie. His cane rested against the pew, and his expression was unreadable. As the bailiff called the court to order, a hush swept the room. Then Tristan was led in, shackled. His once pristine image-tailored suits, crisp white collars, boardroom charisma was gone. In its place stood a man unshaven, pale, and far too small for the myth he once cast. He didn't look at Maya. He didn't look at Luke. He looked down. Judge Ramirez, a stern woman in her late 60s with a deep voice and eyes like granite, adjusted her glasses and addressed the room. Mr. Tristan Harland has been convicted of attempted murder, corporate fraud, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice. Today, we are here to determine the appropriate sentencing for those crimes. She paused. I will begin by hearing victim impact statements. A door opened, and to Maya's surprise, the first person to rise was Luke. He walked slowly, deliberately, with a limp that never fully healed. The room watched as he made his way to the podium. He looked directly at the judge, not at Tristan. My brother tried to kill me, Luke began, voice low but sure. He did not do it in a moment of rage. He did it with planning, intent, and cold calculation. But I am not here to ask for vengeance. A murmur stirred in the gallery. I am here because justice is not a sword. It is a scale. I survived, not by luck but by the courage of others. And I believe the sentence must reflect not only the crime committed but the voices silenced by people like him for decades. He glanced toward Maya. People like her. He stepped away, and Maya knew it was her turn. The walk to the podium felt longer this time. Maya looked at Tristan for the first time since his arrest. He didn't meet her eyes. Good, she thought. She faced the judge. I was a maid, she began. Replaceable. At least that's what they told me. She took a breath. And yet somehow, I'm still standing. Because I didn't let them write the ending. I ran. I bled. I screamed. And I survived. The courtroom was silent. I'm not asking for your honor to make an example out of Mr. Harland. I'm asking you to tell the world loud and clear that power does not mean immunity, that wealth does not rewrite truth, that people like me are not disposable. She stepped back. Judge Ramirez nodded once, then turned to the defendant. Mr. Harland, do you wish to speak before sentencing is issued? Tristan slowly stood. He looked thinner than ever, but his voice still carried the same old arrogance. I have nothing to confess, he said flatly. This entire trial was a spectacle built on betrayal and media manipulation. I was defending a legacy, my family's name, and I will not apologize for protecting what was mine. Oh, the judge leaned forward, expression unreadable. Noted. She picked up the sentencing brief. In light of the gravity of the crimes, the evidence presented, and the impact on victims and society, this court hereby sentences Tristan Harland to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for the first 25 years. The room was still. No clapping, no gasps, just the heavy, final sound of a gavel hitting wood. Later, outside the courthouse, the wind blew sharply across the marble steps. Luke walked beside Maya, silent for a while. Then, quietly, 35 years. It won't bring back what we lost, Maya said. No, Luke replied, but maybe. It'll keep someone else from losing the same. A group of reporters swarmed toward them, cameras rolling. Maya, Luke, a statement please. She paused, turned, looked straight into the lens. The justice system worked today, she said, but we still have more to build. Because this wasn't just one man's crime. It was a culture, and that doesn't die in a courtroom, it dies in a mirror. That evening, the Foundation's phone rang off the hook. Dozens of new whistleblower tips, invitations to testify before committees, and a message left anonymously. Because of you, I didn't quit. I told the truth. Thank you. Later that night, Maya stood at her apartment window, watching the city breathe. The lights flickered like fireflies in glass. Her reflection stared back at her older now, wiser, heavier in soul but lighter in spirit, the kind of woman who had walked through fire and walked out whole. She picked up her notebook and jotted a line. Justice isn't a destination, it's a rhythm, a footstep in the right direction, over and over again. She closed the notebook and whispered to herself, and I'm still walking. The sun broke gently over the city. Golden light spilled across Maya's kitchen counter, illuminating the scattered pages of her morning routine foundation paperwork, thank you cards from strangers, and a letter. Not an email, not a text, a real letter, mailed with a stamp and handwritten in delicate script. She noticed it as she reached for her coffee. No return address, just her name, Maya Williams. She hesitated, the ceramic mug still warm in her hand. Then, carefully, she slid a butter knife beneath the envelope seal and unfolded the paper. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't fan mail. It was something else entirely. Miss Williams, you don't know me, but I've followed your journey closely. I worked for Harland Industries for 27 years. I was there long before Luke or Tristan inherited the empire. I saw the secrets. I buried some. I tried to expose others. And now, I'm tired of being silent. There's something you need to see. If you're willing, meet me, alone, this Thursday, 9 p.m. Address enclosed. A friend of the fire. Maya read it twice. Then a third time. Something about the phrasing chilled her. Not from fear, but from truth. There was no clumsy attempt to manipulate. No flattery. Just a quiet promise. There's more. By midday, Maya had the letter scanned and cross-checked by Gregory. He read it with narrowed eyes, flipping it back and forth, inspecting every corner. I don't like this, he muttered. You never like anything, she said. That's because most things are traps. She poured herself another coffee. It's probably nothing, she added. But if it's not, if there's something still buried, we owe it to the people watching to dig it up. Gregory sighed. And if it's a setup, then I'll be careful. He looked at her with that quiet, older brother expression he wore when concern boiled just beneath restraint. Take someone. She shook her head. They asked for a loan. That usually means fear. Gregory frowned, and fear usually means danger. Thursday night came quickly. The address was in Dogpatch, an industrial pocket of San Francisco that sat between shipyards and forgotten warehouses. Once rough and rusted, it had been half swallowed by trendy developers, but there were still shadows in the corners. Maya parked 3 blocks away. No need to announce herself. She wore plain jeans, a gray hoodie, and her hair pulled back. No press badge, no foundation lanyard. Just Maya. She walked with purpose, her steps muffled by the soft rubber of worn sneakers, until she reached the address. A glass door. No lights, no sign. She hesitated, then knocked. Nothing. She waited. A minute passed. Then a flicker inside movement. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was older, maybe mid-60s, with silver streaks in her tightly curled hair and eyes that had seen too much. You came, the woman said softly. I did, Maya replied. They stood in silence for a moment, reading one another without words. Follow me, the woman said. The inside of the building was more gallery than warehouse. Minimalist. Exposed brick. Archive boxes lined against walls like forgotten tombstones. The woman gestured to a folding chair by a small table. Maya sat. My name's Dolores, the woman said. I handled internal risk assessments for the company. Started under Edward Harland himself, Luke's grandfather. They taught us to disappear problems. Maya leaned in. What kind of problems? Dolores slid a worn folder across the table. Maya opened it. Black and white photos, chemical breakdowns, memos stamped confidential, notes scribbled in the margins. It was worse than she expected. These aren't just environmental violations, Maya whispered. This is chemical testing. On children? Dolores nodded. Mostly in rural Louisiana. Poor communities. No oversight. They called it a developmental supplement, but it wasn't. They were testing neurological reactions, seeing how fast certain toxins spread. No one consented. Maya's heart began to thump. Tristan knew. He inherited the cover-up, yes. But it started long before him. This wasn't his monster. This was the family's. The empire was always built on silence. Maya sat back, the weight of the truth crashing like a tide over her. How many people know? She asked. Not many left, Dolores said. Most are gone. Some turned blind eyes. I was scared. But when I saw what you did, how you stood up, I thought, maybe it's not too late to do the right thing. Maya closed the folder. This wasn't just about Luke or Tristan anymore. This was systemic. Legacy deep. Rot that went back generations. Why now? She asked softly. Dolores met her gaze. Because people are finally listening. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch, surrounded by papers, photos, documents decades old but still pulsing with pain. She called Gregory first, then Luke. By morning, a plan was forming. Expose it all, but do it right. Through the foundation, through verified channels, with protection for Dolores and any other witnesses who might come forward. They weren't just fighting a man anymore. They were fighting history. And history doesn't go quietly. Later that week, Maya stood before a boardroom of legal advisors and trauma counselors. This will cost us, one of them warned. Funding, support, reputation. Maya nodded. I'm not trying to win popularity, she said. I'm trying to tell the truth. Another voice cautious. This could implicate current officials. Maya answered plainly. Then they should be implicated. Luke, seated beside her, smiled quietly. She means it, he said. And they all knew. The storm wasn't over. It was beginning again. But this time, she wasn't running. She was marching forward with fire at her back and truth in her hands. There were truths so heavy, they bent the backs of generations. And now Maya Williams was carrying one of them. In the days following her meeting with Dolores, the Foundation's headquarters became a hive of motion. Legal teams sifted through evidence. Ethics advisors argued over strategy. Whistleblower protection protocols were activated for the first time since the Foundation's inception. But at the center of it all was Maya. Calm, unshaken, focused. She had read every document, every faded memo, every photograph of children with blank stares and distant eyes. She memorized the names of the towns. Street, Martinville, Opelousas, Plaquemine, places no one talked about on cable news. Places power had chosen because it assumed no one would look. Until now, we're not just exposing a corporation, Gregory said in a late-night meeting. We're unraveling the Harland name. This will erase their legacy. Maya looked at him unwavering, then let it burn. Luke remained quiet. He had read the same reports, stared at the same pictures, felt the same nausea in the pit of his stomach. But it was different for him. This wasn't just history. It was his family. Are you ready for that? Maya asked him one evening as they walked the perimeter of his Mendocino property, mist curling over the hills. Luke took his time answering. My grandfather used to say, legacy is like a river. It doesn't care who it drowns as long as it keeps flowing. He paused. I think it's time someone dammed the river. They held a press conference on a Monday. Not in a glittering ballroom. Not in a glass tower. But in the community center of Street, Martinville, Louisiana, one of the towns where the experiments had taken place. The air outside was thick with humidity. Reporters fanned themselves with notepads. Locals stood behind folding chairs, hands crossed, eyes wary. Then Maya stepped to the podium. She wore a navy blouse. No jewelry, no script. She didn't need one. My name is Maya Williams, she began, voice steady. You know me from one story. But the story I'm about to tell you is bigger than me. Bigger than one courtroom. It's about children who were lied to, families who were sacrificed, and an empire that thrived off both. She held up one of the old documents. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a government certified memo detailing a chemical trial carried out in this parish without consent, without ethics, and without consequences. Until now. Gasps rose in the room. Maya continued. We are launching a full investigation into the Harland Foundation's origins and all related experiments carried out under Harland Industries from 1965 onward. If you were affected or know someone who has come forward, you will be protected. You will be heard. Pause. Then firmly, the river ends here. The fallout was immediate. Media outlets exploded. News tickers screamed. New Harland scandal emerges. Foundation goes to war with its own history. The Department of Justice announced a joint investigation within 24 hours. Civil suits began to stack like dominoes. And for the first time in decades, entire communities once ignored by power saw camera crews parked on their porches not to extract their grief, but to listen. Luke received an invitation to speak at a congressional hearing. He declined. I'm not the voice they need to hear, he told Maya. She nodded. But they'll want to hear you say you believe them. Mose. So he compromised. He filmed a statement. In it, he looked straight into the camera, jaw clenched, voice calm. My last name opened doors for me, he said, but it also closed them on countless others. I didn't build this empire, but I benefited from it. And now, I'm using every cent I have to help dismantle what should never have stood. He paused. I am not here to defend my legacy. I'm here to bury it. That evening, back at the Foundation's offices, Maya sat alone in the archive room. The original folder from Dolores was on the table beside her, along with a worn notebook of her own. She flipped it open to the last page and began writing. Asterisk, they will say this story is about Luke. They will say it's about a family betrayal or a fallen dynasty. But they'll be wrong. Asterisk. Asterisk. This story is about what happens when invisible people choose to speak, and someone listens. Asterisk. She closed the book, then turned off the light. That weekend, she returned to Street Martinville, not for cameras, not for politics, but for a town hall and a school gymnasium, where folding chairs were arranged in a circle, not rows. Locals gathered in groups, passing around records, pointing to photos, crying softly. Maya sat among them, not as a guest of honor. Just as Maya, she listened to a woman named Evelyn talk about her brother, who died at 13. She held the hand of a man who remembered being forced to drink something bitter during a health program. She didn't write any of it down. She didn't need to, because this story wasn't hers to own. It was hers to carry, to elevate, to protect. As she left the gym that night, a little girl about 8 years old ran up to her. She had tight braids and wide eyes. She said, "Mama says you're brave." Maya knelt. You know what brave means? The girl shrugged. It means doing the right thing, even when it's scary. The girl nodded slowly, then asked, "Are you scared?" Maya smiled. Sometimes. The girl thought for a second. Me too. They hugged. It wasn't a picture for the news. It wasn't a headline, but it was truth. And truth, Maya had learned, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and that's enough. It had been exactly 1 year since Tristan Harland's sentencing. 12 months since Maya stood in a courtroom and told the world she was no longer invisible. In that time, the Harland Williams Foundation had grown from a cautious idea into a movement etched into the bones of American conscience. Whistleblowers across the country found shelter under its roof. Laws changed. Cases reopened. Old settlements re-examined. New conversations sparked in boardrooms that had once been built to silence dissent. But today, Maya wasn't in a courtroom or a boardroom. She was in a field, a quiet, unmarked plot of land in rural Louisiana, just outside Street Martinville. The grass was overgrown, the air thick with summer, and beside her stood Luke. He looked older, more salt in his beard, lines at the corners of his eyes, but there was something gentler about him now, a softness in his step. The heaviness of guilt had, somehow, made space for something else. Purpose, redemption. They stood silently for a while, watching volunteers finish planting a row of young oak trees. Maya pointed to one with a small plaque staked into the dirt. It read, "In memory of those who were never meant to be remembered. May their names echo where silence once ruled." Luke read it aloud, his voice quiet, reverent. He cleared his throat. "There should be a statue," he said. "A monument." Maya shook her head. "No, this is better." "Why?" "Because trees grow," she said. "Statues stand still. This story isn't over. It shouldn't be frozen in time." He nodded, understanding. They watched a group of schoolchildren walk the path nearby, led by a local teacher explaining what the trees meant. Not in graphic detail, but with truth. Real, clean truth. Later that afternoon, they sat on a wooden bench at the edge of the grove, sipping iced tea out of mason jars someone's grandmother had brought to the dedication. Maya leaned back, staring at the clouds. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't overheard Tristan that night?" Luke exhaled slowly. "All the time. And I'd be dead." He looked at her, and the world would still believe the Harlan name meant strength. She turned to face him. "It means something else now." He smiled. "Because of you." "No," she said, "because we didn't run." They drove back to San Francisco in near silence. Sometimes, there's nothing left to say when a storm finally passes. When the winds die down and the debris is cleared, what remains is something more profound than words. Stillness. A kind of peace born not from absence of conflict, but from surviving it. Back in the city, Maya returned to her apartment a little brighter now, with fresh paint and new photos lining the wall, smiling faces, testimonies, letters from people who once thought they were alone. She stopped at one picture, her and Dolores, side by side, holding the folder that changed everything. Beneath it was a note written in Dolores's hand. "You were the light I was waiting for." Maya ran her fingers over the edge of the frame, then sat down at her desk. She opened her notebook, the same one she'd started when the trial began, and flipped to the very last page. She wrote, "This story began with a secret. A hallway, a whisper behind a door, but it ends in the open, with voices raised, with children walking beneath trees their ancestors never got to plant, with justice, not perfect, not complete, but growing like roots beneath our feet." She closed the notebook for the last time. Across town, the Foundation's headquarters buzzed with life. A new intake of cases from Michigan. An investigation launched in Idaho. A partnership forming with a National Veterans Association. Gregory stood by the front window, watching the sunset spill gold across the marble lobby. A receptionist approached with a package. "Another thank you gift for Miss Williams." Gregory smiled. "She'll never get used to those. Should I leave it on her desk?" He nodded. "Leave it with the others." And miles away, in a small cafe, a girl named Naomi, just 17, opened her laptop and began typing a report about workplace abuse in her retail job. She hesitated for a moment, then opened another tab, the Harlan Williams Foundation website. She clicked, "Submit whistleblower report." "Oh." When the screen asked for a reason, she wrote, "Because I heard Maya Williams speak on the radio last night. Because I'm tired of pretending. Because I believe her when she says I matter." Then she pressed send, and so the story lives on. In roots, in whispers, in every quiet act of courage, not carved in stone, but carried in the hearts of those who refuse to be invisible. This story reminds us that true justice doesn't begin in courtrooms, it begins in courage. Maya Williams showed that even the most invisible voices can shake the tallest towers when they refuse to be silenced. Power built on silence will always fear truth, but truth once spoken grows like roots beneath our feet. The legacy we leave behind isn't in names or fortune, but in the lives we choose to protect. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is listen, believe, and take one step forward, even when we're scared.